chapter of Mr. Riggs plays. And right now we have an exciting guest by the name of Miss Vicki Meek. And when I first met Miss Meek was I was at an all night jazz session, and I had never really got introduced to her. And these are jazz sessions mostly consist of all the artists around in Dallas that came in from 12 o'clock to about 4 o'clock in the morning. And through these jazz sessions, she mostly got everybody exposure to their talents, and basically she basically got everything together and let everybody have a way to vent themselves and get known around in Dallas. Because I grew up in South Dallas, and mostly the musicians in Dallas basically didn't have a platform for themselves to be heard or seen or known, except to get into somebody's big name band. Then you look around and go, wait, they have to leave town in order to get famous. So I would say like Miss Meek was kind of like the one that really preserved jazz in Dallas. Do you accept that as challenge?
Well, I certainly will take the mantle that I was about trying to support local jazz musicians.
Yes, ma'am.
And, all of that came from when I took over the South Dallas Cultural Center in 1997. One of the things that I knew, because when I moved here in 80, there were some nice jazz spots. And by the end of 80, they were gone. Strictly Taboo, the Recovery Room. I mean, there were a number of places that you could go and hear jazz and really hear it, not just, background music like Sambuca and places like that. And they all dried up when the economy fell apart in the 80s. And so by the time I took over the center in the 90s, I had decided that if I got control of a place, one of the first things I was going to do was to provide an opportunity for the jazz musicians to have an after set spot. My friend, really good friend, Roger Boykin, had told me a lot about the Woodman and how its whole legacy of, being the place where artists were able to cut their teeth and were able to see some of the masters like Red Garland and others playing there, Buster Smith. And we didn't have that anymore. The Woodman was pretty much closed at that point. And the Green Parrot was no longer really functioning in that way. It would have a resurgence for a minute when Jeanette took over, but then it died again. And so there really wasn't any place for the musicians to come after they'd done a set and just jam. So jamming at the center was my answer to that problem, is that, we would start at midnight and we would go till 3, sometimes later, as you said, sometimes 4. And I must say that when I started that, I was a younger woman. So as the time went on, it got harder and harder to have that hour of my staff looked at me like I was nuts. It's like, what? We're doing what? But it became a place where I was very proud of the fact that we had younger musicians, less experienced musicians who could come and sit in with the more experienced ones. It had several iterations in terms of I had several people who were coordinating getting the musicians for me. The last round being Shelley Carroll. So we would have the house band so we could guarantee that we would always have, all the pieces for a real good jazz band. And then anybody else who wanted to sit in after a while, after the house band had played for a while, was welcome to come. And you've been there, it was a beautiful environment. There was no competition. It was really a space where people could come and hear some really good jazz and just lay back and, no alcohol, no smoking. You better not be talking because we put you out if you were. It was about respect for the musicians.
Yes,
And that's because I come out of a family of jazz musicians.
okay, now
And
let's have a little introduction to yourself. Now, basically, where was your place of origin? Where were you born in? How did you come?
I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, born and raised. And I, lived a lot of places. Once I left Philly, went away to college, I didn't really go back to live in Philadelphia. But my brother, who is a jazz musician, stayed there. He's someone who's had a career his entire life. He's what, if I'm 70, he's 75, 74, 75, something like that. And he's been a jazz musician his entire career. He's been lucky in that way. Philadelphia has a long tradition of jazz. He played with Grover Washington for quite a number of years, and then he played with Philly Joe Jones for quite a number of years. And then he had his own groups, but the whole time he's made a living as a jazz musician. Now, I won't say it's been a lucrative living, but he made a living and he raised his kids being a jazz musician. I had an uncle who was a jazz musician in Illinois, and he played with King Oliver's band back in the day. And now he unfortunately gave up his career when he had his family and became a government worker. And it was I'm convinced that's what killed him. He was not able to do his trade. And he was a brilliant saxophone player. I have a cousin who is also a saxophone player. I have a sister who's a jazz singer. There's a lot of jazz in my family. So I've always respected the art form. I've always felt that it never got its just due in this country as America's music. It is the only original music other than rock and roll, which is also ours, that we have given to the world. And I say it's America's classical music. And, America has not treated it as such. So I knew that whenever I got a chance, I was going to provide that opportunity for people to understand that this music was important music, and it was music that demanded respect.
Okay, now, what schools did you go to? Now, I had talked to somebody and I learned that you are an artist too.
Yeah, I basically kept my art life separate from what I did in arts administration here in Dallas. My art life is in Houston. They all know me as an artist. They don't even know I'm an arts administrator. Here in Dallas, everybody knows I'm an arts administrator, and very few people knew I was an artist. But I got my Bachelor's of Fine Arts from Tyler School of Fine Arts, this part of Temple University. And then I got my Master's of Fine Arts from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So, I've been a practicing artist for over 40 some odd years. And actually, I'm going to be opening my retrospective that was in Houston in November. I'll be opening that at the African American Museum next week. So people can get an idea of what I did as an artist and doing. And then I'll have another installation that will open at the National Sculpture Center in January. So, people, now that I'm retired from the South Dallas Cultural Center, I feel a lot less anxious about, doing art here. I didn't want to ever be in competition with the local artists because I felt my job was to promote the local artists, not to set up situations where I could benefit. So now that I no longer have that responsibility, I feel a lot less anxious about, showing my own work here in the city. And so you may see a few more things happen here that didn't happen while I was running the South Dallas Cultural Center.
Okay, I remember one time, I don't know where you were the director at the time. I'm a photographer too, and I brought my daughter down to the studio where Mr. Hickman was set up his studio down there. A lot of people didn't know we had a photography studio inside there. You got a recording studio inside there, and a lot of people didn't know all those hidden treasures inside South Dallas like that. So, I learned that how Mr. Hickman was he was a great photographer. He did a lot of work for Jet magazine and Ebony and stuff back in the day. And when he first wrote that book, and I kind of got real close to him when he was up there, and I learned a lot from him myself. And who are some of your mentors? And I know like everybody in music has somebody kind of take them up under their arms and guide them and put you on the right path. Who were your mentors or your idols back in the day?
Well, I was very fortunate in that I had parents who were art supporters, and we had art in our house, Black art in our house. So I have always had Black artists as people that I could look towards as mentors. I was particularly close to Elizabeth Catlett, who is she's deceased now, but she was a sculptor and a printmaker who had to leave America because of her political views in the 50s, and she was in Mexico for most of her adult life. But my parents put her in front of me when I was 8 years old and said I wanted to be a sculptor. And they wanted me to see that there is such a thing as a Black woman sculptor. So they showed me her work in a book. And then I had a couple of other artists, Romare Bearden being one of them, Jacob Lawrence being another one, that I was very much in tune with what they were doing aesthetically. So I've been really fortunate in that I was able to actually meet these people. And because back in the day, you know, the artists were very accessible. When Elizabeth came to America in the 70s, I got to meet her and we became close friends. And then from then on, you know, it was like I'd go to Mexico periodically and she'd come back and forth. And she, because of her political views being the same as my parents, they were both, I would say, pretty radical. And the fact that she had shown me how to have a family as well as be an artist. Because at first I thought, you know, I wasn't gonna have any kids because you can't be a woman and have kids and be an artist and get your work done and all that. She was like, nah, you can do that. You can just take a little break and have some kids and do what you gotta do. So she was very instrumental in helping me navigate being a Black woman artist in America. And all of those things were very helpful for me as I was developing my aesthetic and doing the work.
Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about some of your successes and some of your